On a fateful evening in May of 1887, Minneapolis was rocked by three massive explosions that echoed throughout the city. As residents rushed into the streets to investigate what had happened, they were met with a spectacle of chaos, a towering cloud of debris and heavy chunks raining down, transforming the skyline forever. Now, as you might imagine, this wasn't just any explosion. It marked the fiery demise of the Washburn A Mill, the largest flour mill in the world at the time. And for the curious-minded, like you and I, what happened since then was astonishing, as the remnants of this disaster were just left open to the elements, preserving the secrets of a bygone era when Minneapolis was the flour milling capital of the world. So, what mysteries lie hidden here? Stay tuned to find out, as this is the story of the Minneapolis ruins. I'm your host Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. Before we get started here today, I wanted to tell you about something that has made my life in the kitchen so much easier, and it can do the same for you. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. They deliver delicious recipes and fresh ingredients right to your door. You can also get 10 free meals and a complimentary breakfast for life. With all the traveling I do for work and planning content for the channel, finding time to cook can be really challenging. But with HelloFresh, I no longer have to worry about what to cook or going to the grocery store. Everything comes pre-portioned, and the best part is that in just a few minutes, I've got an incredible meal ready to go. Plus, you can customize everything, adjust the delivery date, mix and match recipes to fit your mood, and skip the weekends if you can't cook at home. It's super flexible. What I love most is the variety. They have over 50 dinner options weekly, so there's always something new to try. And if you're looking for healthy choices, they've got recipes like Calorie Smart and Protein Smart that fit any lifestyle. But above all that, the most important thing that HelloFresh gives me is the time I need to focus on what matters, spending more time with my family, and putting more energy into this channel. Honestly, it's made my life so much easier. So try it out by visiting our link in the description and using our special code to receive 10 free meals plus complimentary breakfast for life. And for those of you in the US, this includes one breakfast item per box while the subscription is active. The link and code are valid in all countries, and the local discount will apply. Thanks HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and now, back to our story. The city of Minneapolis is located at a unique spot on the Mississippi River, allowing it to take advantage of an abundant natural energy source, St. Anthony Falls. Thanks to this natural waterfall in the river, the city could develop its two primary industries, flour and lumber milling, though the falls were not the only advantage granted to Minneapolis in the 19th century, since it was also conveniently close to the significant wheat-producing regions of Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Canada. Those resources provided abundant raw material and allowed the city's many mills to operate at full capacity. The above facts, together with its quickly developing railroad infrastructure at the time, all contributed to the city's moniker, the flour milling capital of the world. The first water-powered mills were established in Minnesota in the 1820s when the troops from Fort Snelling on the west side of the falls started building the first milling infrastructure, also explaining how the first government sawmill and government grist mill were constructed. I should also point out, when mentioning Fort Snelling, it is impossible to omit its role during the Dakota War of 1862. At that time, it served as the center of operations for the U.S. Army in their military conflict against the Dakota people. And its story gets a bit darker, as it was also the detention center which Native Americans were transported to during their forced removal from Minnesota. Anyhow, the soldiers from that fort were instrumental in establishing the two aforementioned mills. But after Fort Snelling was completed, the buildings were abandoned, only to later be leased to Illinois Congressman Robert Smith, who came to Minneapolis, marking the first time that the private sector established itself near the falls. Congressman Smith, one of the founding partners of the Minneapolis Milling Company, currently known as General Mills, operated the mills until the mid-1850s. But then, after the surrounding sites were opened up to more private development in 1852, more investors started tapping into the energy potential of St. Anthony Falls. At that time, many new mills were established in the area, including Minneapolis Mill, Union Mill, and Columbia Mill, where in addition to flour, wool, and lumber were also processed, making Minneapolis one of the densest hubs of industry in the world. In 1856, the Minneapolis Milling Company was incorporated by Robert Smith, Dorlis Morrison, and notably Cadwallader C. Washburn. The enterprise took advantage of the land leased earlier by Congressman Smith and soon established a dam, a canal, and a complex set of water transfer tunnels, which were also made available to the other ventures in the area, but for a small fee. Anyhow, Washburn was ambitious. He envisioned building his own grand flour mill. And guess what? In 1866, his mission was completed. This was no ordinary mill. The building's footprint was 66 by 100 feet and reached 4 stories in height. It was powered by water from the First Street Canal, and it was technologically advanced. The Washburn Mill was the first mill to introduce the revolutionary middlings purifier, a device used to remove the husks from kernels of wheat. Even though the people in the area considered the mill to be too big to turn a profit, Mr. Washburn soon decided to start constructing an even larger building. His new investment, completed in 1874, was made of limestone, reached over 6 stories, and housed 41 milling stones powered by turbines located 45 feet below the street level. It was claimed to be one of the largest flour mills in the world back then. When the bigger building was finished, the 2 mills were then designated A and B. So I suppose the main question might be, is it possible that the size of this building contributed to its later demise? So now let's talk about the downfall. The story goes as follows. On May the 2nd, 1878, around 6 p.m., the day crew ended their shifts and returned home. A smaller group of 14 people then entered the building to start the night shift. Unfortunately for them, about an hour later, dust accumulated in the mill and was ignited, causing an immense explosion. Now, it's not clear what the source of the ignition was, but it is known that with the concentration of dust in the presence of oxygen, even the smallest spark can cause combustion. And in the case of this disaster, the most widely accepted theory is that a spark came from the milling stones grinding against each other. So, in mere moments, a mill was completely eviscerated. But it doesn't end there, because flour dust, when ignited, causes a phenomenon known as a pressure wave, a shock wave that lifts more dust into the air, amplifying the explosion in the process. This effect often leads to secondary explosions, which explains why people heard 3 subsequent bangs on that fateful evening. The night shift crew perished immediately, and temperatures in the building were so high that local firefighters had no way of even getting close to the building to extinguish the flames. Though they battled the inferno throughout the night, and the fires ended up consuming a total of 6 buildings. This included B Mill, which unfortunately claimed 4 more lives. It's also said that Mr. Washburn immediately traveled to the disaster site and began planning the construction of yet an even bigger mill in the aftermath of this catastrophe. To his credit, he hired an Austrian engineer who incorporated state-of-the-art ventilation systems and dust collectors to prevent flour dust from accumulating in the new building. We also came across a claim that stated Mr. Washburn started a fund to help the victims' families and became the fund's most generous contributor. I'd personally take that with a grain of salt, though, as this statement was found on the website of General Mills, the direct corporate descendant of the Minneapolis Milling Company. The new Washburn Mill was completed in 1880 and remained operational until the Great Depression. The building was officially closed off in 1965 and almost burned down in 1991. It was later partially salvaged and now houses the Mill City Museum, which opened in 2003. As we mentioned before, the Washburn Mills were not the only mills in the area. At its peak, the West Bank of the Mississippi hosted over 20 mills, and the remnants of many of them can now be seen in the Mills Ruins Park. Throughout the 19th century, Minneapolis flour milling business was still booming. The industry saw several significant technological advancements, such as the aforementioned purifiers, ventilators, and roller mills, all of which contributed to the city remaining at the forefront of flour milling. Another factor that facilitated the growth of various industries across Minnesota was its ever-expanding network of railroads. James J. Hill, a Canadian-American railroad executive who settled in Minnesota in 1856, was another key person in this development. For example, he was one of the architects behind the Stone Arch Bridge, one of the most characteristic landmarks of the city today. In the first half of the 19th century, most of Minneapolis's industrial activity centered around the Mississippi's western bank, with the east side of the river hosting the small community of St. Anthony. which, due to the region's explosive growth, became home to many up-and-coming businesses. Initially, the two communities were connected by a suspension bridge, which was severely overused and in constant need of maintenance. Surprisingly, the initial response to the idea of building a proper bridge was negative. The initiative was referred to as Hill's Folly. Local residents doubted the bridge's utility and were severely skeptical whether such a project could succeed without significant federal funding. It is possible, however, that such rumors were mostly propagated by Hill's competitors rather than the actual population of Minneapolis. Completed in 1883, the bridge quickly became a key component in the rapid growth of the city, ultimately connecting the labor force with industry, a synergy that put Minneapolis on the road to greatness. And to this day, the Minneapolis Park Board manages it as a biking and walking path. Minneapolis flourished as the flour milling capital of the world until the Great Depression, but partially due to the introduction of other methods of powering mills, it started losing its competitive edge and advantage as early as the 1880s. At that time, steam-powered mills were twice as efficient, and later, electrical mills also started being used. The consolidation of milling operations under General Mills, while at the same time streamlining and optimizing operations, also made the local industry more prone to economic turmoil. Then, with a significant drop in local soil fertility, possibly due to overfarming, as well as other factors, the milling industry was in trouble. In fact, they were not ready for the Great Depression. And when it hit, the city was severely affected by the economic downturn of the 1930s. So, with the Washburn A Mill finally closing down in 1965, Minneapolis's flour milling era came to a definitive end. Some of the turbines were repurposed as electric generators, but for the most part, the entire area generally fell into despair. The 1991 fire of the old Washburn Mill was also a final nail in the coffin. After the fire, local authorities began excavating and laying the foundations for Mill Ruins Park. This concept was meant to preserve the town's history by exposing the remnants of its old milling infrastructure and creating a space where it could be safely explored. Between 2001 and 2005, subsequent sites of the park were open to the public, together with the Mill City Museum, which was established on the ruins of the Washburn A Mill, where many visitors claim that the ruins seem poorly maintained, though they do offer a glimpse into the long-gone era of opportunity and explosive growth in the city of Minneapolis. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you'll consider subscribing. And if you like these tales of urban decay, don't miss our episode about the rise and fall of Nichols Hall by clicking right here. But I've got to warn you, it's not for the faint of heart. Until next time, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.